Disney has completely forgotten how to write songs for their male characters, and nothing proves this more than the abomination that is princess problems from the new live-action Snow White. And what is literally insane to me is that this song butchers the modern messaging Disney wanted this remake to have, and it actually takes a huge step backwards compared to the original animated movie from the 1930s. This isn't even just about Jonathan, he is just the latest example of a greater problem in every Disney princess movie post-2000s. And the writing of the male characters not only pisses me off, it makes the writing of the female leads worse. And I'm gonna reveal how. This is Calxiyn here to make you care, brought to you by my patrons and my YouTube members so I can show you that it is that deep and it's fun, or at least cathartic, to talk about why. So if this is your first video of mine, please don't let it be the last because this is a bit of an abnormal situation. Typically I analyze the technical aspects of composition and lyricism, and then I use that as a segue to dive into what's not working emotionally with the characterization or the storytelling. I also rewrite the song to showcase how the messages the songwriters wanted to send could have hit harder if they had made stronger technical choices. But with Asha and Snow White, the reason why I was so thorough was because I was passionate about the potential. These weren't songs I hated, they're songs I thought I would love but ended up being disappointed in. When it comes to this song, however, I find it to be completely irredeemable. The reason I talk so much about fundamentals is because songs are a mode of delivery for meaning, and if the vessel is shoddy, even the most sincere, heartfelt messages can't reach us. However, if the vessel is made of shit, and the cargo the vessel is carrying is just boxes upon boxes of more shit, what would be the point of me spending 30 minutes talking about how we need to build a better boat? Build a better boat to deliver the shit? That's lunacy! But here's the Cliff Notes version if you really want to know. Unlike the other songs that I've covered on this channel before, the composition does have some of the dynamic qualities that make musical theater special. There are musical theater reactions where the music is briefly reacting to Jonathan.
And prospects, well, they're rather grim. Does that dampen your day? Do the facts make you frown?
But when Snow White sings, they don't make the music react to her at all. She just gets Jonathan's instrumentation instead of her own unique instrumentation blending in with his, and it sucks. Music is supposed to represent the character's heart and soul, but this is still aggressively shallow. A character can lie, but music cannot, and so music should be giving us insight into the character's hidden depth. But for the music to showcase Jonathan's depth, he would need to have some first, and so maybe in hindsight, this composition matches him perfectly. And though nothing ever reaches Wish levels of rhyme and meter issues, there are a couple spots that have them here. Though some of the lyrics are good, like I actually really like Snow White's None for All and All for None, I thought that was funny, some of them are just as cringeworthy as Wish and downright cruel to Snow White when you think about the context. And I feel kind of bad about this one, but I have to mention it, so I apologize in advance. This is not an attack on the actor, but Kermit the Frog here is not pulling off the tone or the energy needed for a character like this. He just isn't. When I heard about this song existing, I was expecting something more like Dimitri or Fiyero, but instead we got this. This would be like if they did a live-action Hunchback of Notre Dame, but everybody except Quasimodo was played by a Muppet. How am I supposed to believe that this guy is too cool for school when it sounds like he would be getting shoved in a locker? Anyway, maybe that's too harsh, but if you are interested in nitty-gritty songwriting technique, watch my video on Waiting on a Wish. But it would be a waste of your time and mine to try to rescue a song with such a bad premise or use this song to teach fundamentals when I already have other videos that do that, and the fundamentals are not actually the problem here. I think it's much more valuable to focus on character and storytelling because that's where this song actually falls apart. I'm sure at least one person is writing me an essay about how I just don't like Jonathan because he has flaws, and that he is supposed to be selfish, and how that is the point of his character arc, but I know that. The problem isn't that he's selfish or flawed, my problem is that his selfishness is handled so poorly, and we are subjected to an entire musical number about it that contributes nothing, not even entertainment. Much like stories, individual songs operate on promise, progress, and payoff. The first few lyrics of a song promise what the song will explore. Then sections of the songs are building blocks that create a sense of momentum and progress. Then we get the payoff. Musical numbers give us emotional progress or plot progress like exposition and world building, and a well-crafted song will have lyrics that make the audience ask questions that will then be answered. But this song sits in a single feeling, which is already a musical theater sin, and it does not just sit, it stews in Jonathan's insufferable assholery. In my last video, I talked about 5 tools that writers use to build compelling characters: unfairness, competence, initiative, likability, and secret motivation. If a character lacks likability, but you don't want the audience to groan every time they see them, it is advised to make them competent. That generates a sense of progress because we're still excited to see the asshole in question for what they may divulge about the world or other characters. Initiative works in a similar way, where if the character is inciting something that pushes us towards the conflict, that makes the audience appreciate them even if they don't like them. Love interests like this do not always have to be liked at first, but they need to be tolerated. I cannot tolerate Jonathan. Before the movie came out, I was under the impression that Jonathan would be a Robin Hood type character who did crime to resist the tyranny of the Queen. But not only is he an asshole who is only in it for himself, he is a particularly useless asshole in this song. Jonathan regurgitates information that the audience in Snow White already knew. It would be different if this happened way earlier in the movie, like Snow White sneaks into the kingdom like Jasmine does and is completely clueless. But the audience in Snow White know how bad the situation is in the kingdom, not only from Waiting on a Wish, but other songs and scenes before this point. So when he has mocking lyrics like, "Do the facts make you frown? Waking up to the real world is bringing you down," he's just rubbing salt in the wound. It's not like Snow White didn't know about the famine and the poverty. And because Jonathan closed off that promise of competence, of "You just joined the fight now, Snow White, but me and my bandits have been fighting the whole time, let's do this," I now had a different expectation, that this would be an argument song where Snow White convinces him to help her. But at the end of the song, he has not budged an inch. He explicitly says he will not help her, and so he has no initiative that matters to us. And this actually decreases Snow White's initiative and competence because she is a doormat to this random man. If they were hell-bent on writing him to be this unlikable, they should have written a "I'll help you if you do X, Y, and Z for me" type song, because that would have at least pushed the plot forward and Snow White would have looked more competent if she could have successfully appealed to him. And I know that Pasek and Paul can do this because think about it this way. Imagine if Other Side from The Greatest Showman didn't end with a deal after all that bargaining. Or for another example, if There Are Other Ways from the Circe saga of Epic didn't end with Circe choosing to help Odysseus. If we went through all of that and then they were like, "LOL, nah, go figure it out yourself," it would have been a waste of our time. Jonathan is basically saying a single word: no, and we do not need to spend 2 minutes on the word no! And this is what I mean when I say that how the male characters are written ends up hurting the leading ladies, because it's like, girl, get up! Argue with him! Don't let him talk to you that way! Like, what are we doing here? Snow White interjects once. That does not constitute fighting back. She does not fight back. She seems passive, and she's just accepting him being a condescending jerk. And the worst part is there's no justifiable reason on the part of the writers for her just sitting here and listening to him, because it's not like he has some super secret information that we need anyway. If you ask me, that's not very girl boss of this girl boss Snow White. And this leads me into Jonathan's likability. Because we can excuse a song that brings everything to a screeching halt if it's at least entertaining or gives us an internal revelation about the character. Jonathan is supposed to be a roguish character similar to Flynn Rider, but he lacks all of Flynn Rider's charm. Something that Glenn Keane stressed while working on Tangled was that Flynn still needed to have vulnerability and sincerity, especially in his eyes, because otherwise he could have completely alienated the audience. This is why you have Flynn and Rapunzel have an intimate moment before Rapunzel says she thinks Flynn likes her to her mother, because otherwise we'd be like, Mother Gothel's right, like, girl, get up, he's not worth it. And then he also bears his heart and soul to us during I See the Light. In a similar vein, this is why they made sure to apply Save the Cat to Aladdin. The act of giving the orphans the bread is so the audience can see his softer side and that he's not a complete self-serving asshole. The fact that he also protects the children from this douche canoe who is coming to court Jasmine endears us to Aladdin and would erase any doubt left over in the minds of the audience. You can't force the audience to like your character, just like I can't force any of you to like me. But there is a higher chance of success when you use these strategies. You can have them be funny, you can do Save the Cat, you can do what Aladdin did and bring in another character who is even more unlikable and put your hero in direct opposition with them. And this hints at the problem I have with Maui, Kristoff, and Naveen to varying degrees. They do not get to pour their heart and soul out to the audience through song. Whenever they sing, it's shallow or it's played off as a joke. And just like You're Welcome or Kristoff's reindeer song or the little part that Naveen has in When We're Human, Jonathan's song is not vulnerable. This is snark. This is insincere. Now, sometimes the writers go, oh shit, we forgot to show that they have feelings, and we get an emergency vulnerability moment near the end of the movie. But in a musical, song is more important than script to me, and the scenes usually feel forced or like they were just shoehorned in there. The reason why flawed characters like Flynn, Aladdin, or even the Beast work is because they have vulnerable scenes and they get to sing. And on a deeper level, and this may be even more important, by the time their behavior starts to get really bad, like say Aladdin lying to everyone, we already know the insecurity or fear that is driving that behavior, and so Aladdin has earned empathy from us. We understand why he's doing it. He is afraid that Jasmine will not accept him for who he is, and that puts his super objective under attack, which is something we talked about in that last video that I will get to later. So the immediate problem with Jonathan is that I had a bad feeling I wasn't going to like him. But even if I had liked him at the beginning of the movie for some reason, all of my goodwill would have been erased by now. And the narrative has not displayed any clues towards his super objective, and so why do I care if he gets what he wants? Why should I be rooting for you? Snow White won't be saved by the prince according to Gal Gadot, but Snow White will sure as hell be condescended to by some random man. The press tour here is not doing us any favors because everyone who worked on this movie, not just Rachel, I won't let her be the scapegoat for this because it was everyone, they all talked about how this Snow White was gonna be empowering and how the prince in the original movie was creepy or weird or their dynamic was dated. You know the prince, right? The prince who Snow White was already in love with and who serenaded her with a vulnerable, poetic, heartfelt declaration of love, who reassured Snow White when she was embarrassed of her appearance that he loved her no matter what. That's the prince who's outdated, the soft, emotionally intelligent, vulnerable prince? But the man belittling and reducing the abuse and trauma that Snow White has experienced to princess problems is totally fine? And that same person who was writing the essay earlier is now typing, well, Jonathan didn't know, but didn't she give him a piece of bread at the beginning of the movie? Did he not see her dressed in rags? She freed him and she gave him food! And fine, even if he didn't know, he doesn't have to. I at least expect Snow White to go, remember when I saved your sorry ass from getting tied up to the gates and beaten and flogged or starved to death or whatever the queen was gonna do with him? Maybe you could show a little gratitude. It wasn't exactly a picnic for me either, bro. I was abused by my stepmother. I wasn't exactly living it up. Why the fuck would he sing Go Tell the Queen in response to Snow White saying that the kingdom needs help when he knows that the queen is the problem? She is evil, she's not gonna change! And this is why I feel like, though I cannot pin all the blame on Pasek and Paul, they are still a little responsible, like in the same way that Julia Michaels was screwed over by Disney when it came to giving her context, but she still wrote, when it comes to the universe, we're all shareholders of her own free will. Disney didn't cause her songwriting problems. She did that on her own. She has to own it. I have an entire video about Disney's production pipeline and how the mentality of song go here is screwing over the songwriters, which is why we keep ending up with songs that don't transform the characters. A musical theater song must transform a character so they are completely different from when the song started, but the screenwriters are just picking up where they left off, and so Pasek and Paul wouldn't be allowed to do anything plot influential. But the way to get around this is have Jonathan have an emotional revelation instead of a plot-related one. Jonathan could have still chosen not to help her, but they could have understood each other at least by the end of this song, which I don't think Jonathan does, and that makes the duet they have later fall flat. And even though I have no interest in rewriting this song, I do have 2 examples of what they could have done instead. But first I have to thank my patrons and my YouTube members once again. Please consider joining them if you do want to support me or my original songwriting projects, and not only do you get early access, you also get to influence what I make next, and so there's tons of cool rewards. It's not for nothing, okay? I'm offering a little something something. Either way, whether you're a patron or a subscriber, which you should be if you've gotten this far, I appreciate you being here, and so now let's get into how we can fix this. So here's what we can do. You can go the I think I got you beat route from Shrek the Musical, where Shrek starts in a place of I had it worse than you, princess, you spoiled brat, but he realizes that him and Fiona are not so different after all. Basically, you make this an argument song between Snow White and Jonathan, and through our empathy for Snow White, we will grow to like Jonathan if the conclusion is supposed to be, oh wait a minute, they both experience the same thing. And most importantly, if we see Jonathan realize that too and he softens. Again, he doesn't need to help her, but he may feel bad for not helping her, which is a change in his character compared to the beginning. An easy way to accomplish that is by giving Jonathan a shitty parental figure. And so instead of, I think the world is selfish and cruel and shitty, it could be, well, my stepdad always taught me it's dog eat dog. It's everyone for themselves. And then that way, we are no longer mad at Jonathan for saying these things. Our ire turns on like, what kind of grown adult teaches that to a child? Like, we understand that Jonathan was innocent once and he was corrupted. And then that way, there's also common ground with Snow White and Jonathan because the evil queen has been trying to poison Snow White the same way. The queen has said, you need to be more selfish and cynical. The people don't need luxuries. Luxuries spoil them. They need to remember their place in the world. This is how we'd have a transformation even if Pasek and Paul are not allowed to do a Snow White convinces Jonathan song. There is a way you can make this work as a solo though. Remember earlier when I talked about the idea of a super objective? You can still have a fuckboy character be interesting to the audience through a secret motivation. And here's what I mean by that. In the Hunchback of Notre Dame musical, Phoebus has a fuckboy song called Rest and Recreation. It's very similar to, say, Fiyero from Wicked. On the surface, he's going, give me your girls of pleasure, your grapes of Merlot, right, so drinking and fucking. But during this song, we find out that Phoebus is literally haunted by the screams of his dead comrades. And that they were all used as tools for petty wars and thrown away like trash. There is some really disturbing imagery in the lyrics where you can almost smell the rotting corpses that he's singing about, and you feel the weight of how Phoebus was constantly reminded of his own mortality. Beyond this womanizing, charming pretty boy is someone who is using all of this as escapism to forget the horrors. This earns empathy from us because Phoebus shares something intimate and vulnerable with us that other characters do not know about him. Even if he puts on a mask with those people, he's not putting on a mask with us. He's suddenly being honest. We also understand that Phoebus is the underdog here, that he isn't in charge like Frollo is, and he is being used and mistreated by the people in power. This has him have more in common with Quasimodo and Esmeralda in comparison to Frollo. And his mentality of, and whatever I do, I am sure this is true, I will never go back again, is important for later because it means the sacrifice Phoebus makes when he turns against Frollo, when he gives up everything that he ever wanted, has more emotional weight. We understand that before he would have given the world to never go back, to never see those horrors again, but he gives up his position to do what's right and protect Esmeralda. Now, I think in this song that Phoebus comes off as charming. That's subjective, so let's say to you that he didn't. He would at least come off as competent and willing to take initiative in relation to the plot, whereas Jonathan is trying to escape from the plot. And most of us will extend Phoebus grace because there is a difference between I don't care about other people, I'm just in it for myself, compared to I did care once and I lost everything because of it. I experienced so much pain and watched so many of my friends die. And it's through that we understand what the character needs as opposed to what they want, which is what I actually mean by secret motivation. It's the super objective, the key at the end of the last video. Ariel's motivation is not I want to go to the human world. That is a goal. Her super objective, her need, is I want to be understood and accepted. That goal is just something that slots underneath the super objective in her eyes. Phoebus' super objective is not to be captain of the guard. I think it's safe to say it's community, comfort, stability. And he wasn't originally seeking out love, but it slots in because being with people that we love gives us a sense of comfort and community and the stability that we desire. Through his relationship to Esmeralda, he was not only being with Esmeralda, he was going to be integrated into the rest of the Romani community. They were all going to leave together. Phoebus' super objective was under attack by being at the front of the war, which is why he had to leave. Being captain of the guard is a temporary objective that he thinks will fulfill his super objective permanently. And his experiences warped his outlook to the point where he thinks that trying to be good only brings you suffering, that there's no point in trying to change the world because the world is fundamentally unfair. He thinks he can only leave the place where suffering happens, not change it, not stop the suffering. Esmeralda is the personification of hope, and when change in the narrative starts to happen because of her, he realizes that it is possible. There are always multiple routes a character can go down to fulfill their super objective, and this tends to be most obvious in villain characters, like the character that didn't have to be evil to get what they want, they just chose the dark path. Maybe it was easier, maybe they were spiteful, but either way, it didn't have to be the darkness, they were tempted by the darkness. For Phoebus' super objective, he could have stayed in a world where he just turned a blind eye to the whores. But another way to achieve this is to join Esmeralda and create a better world without those whores. Obviously, I'm talking about Phoebus' arc for the entire show, and that's not exactly fair to Jonathan, right? Because we're only talking about his one song. But the point that I'm trying to make is that Phoebus' turmoil is literally revealed to us the first time we see him. And that reveals his super objective to us very early on, to the point where even if you have never seen Hunchback before, you may have been like, yeah, that guy's changing by the end of the story. Like, if you have good pattern recognition, you probably had that instinct about him. That is a promise. But Jonathan doesn't have a moment in this song where I can see the promise of his growth. They have a snarky conversation masquerading as banter, this song happens, and 10 minutes later they're in love! What do you mean? I feel like no one else is concerned enough about the messages that these new leading men are sending to people, especially to children. The princes in the old animated movies were not very fleshed out, but at least they were soft and gentle and romantic and kind. And we need to remember that they were representative of an idea. They were never meant to have a full hero's journey circle. Fairy tales were wish fulfillment for the peasants at the time. The common folk did not have money or power or status. They only had their wit, intelligence, their virtues like kindness or some sort of skill like a trade, and they were rewarded by fate for their goodness. They may not be rich with wealth or status, but the fact that they are rich in virtue compels the royalty to the point where they don't care if their true love is a peasant and will even give up their positions of power to be with that peasant. They sing these earnest songs of love where they are vulnerable with the audience, but also their true love. Fairy tales were wish fulfillment for people who had nothing else except for dreams. Now we may have men with more personality, sure, but I ask you, where do men who are at worst egotistical, mean, shallow, selfish bullies, or at best just incompetent, lazy, and clueless fit in with my hopes and dreams, with the hopes and dreams that I want my kids to have? And as I alluded to at the beginning, it's not just Jonathan, Kristoff, Naveen, and even Maui have varying degrees of this. And I would like to make a whole video where we go through every man to dive into Disney's leading man problem, so subscribe for that. Hopefully it'll be sooner than you think. But it's not even just Disney either. Like, I can't pick up a romance show or a book that doesn't have this stupid cliche in it. And And the reason why I'm so angry is because I'm sick of it. I hate it. Like these supposedly heroic men, these men that we're supposed to, root for the heroine to get with, are sarcastic in a way that the writers want to be witty and charming, but instead they're just mean and borderline abusive in some of these books. The lyrics of the song are supposed to be haha funny banter, but instead they're just cruel. I love and I write enemies to lovers or rivals to lovers on a regular basis. I don't mind, a little banter, a little toxicity even, if we're talking about people that are enemies. But it needs to be equal toxicity at least, not just the man being rude to the woman. And that's how it usually always is with these dynamics. It's these sarcastic, snarky jabs that are meant to cause harm towards the female character, and the female characters never banter back. It's like these writers don't know how to make a character funny without making them mean. You can have humor to lighten up a situation or to put someone at ease. An inside joke, something that is maybe at both of your expense, where we are laughing with you instead of this character laughing at someone. But I'm tired of this, and it's so shitty to me, because if Disney was afraid that they were sending a bad message to young girls by having the princesses be saved by a man, which isn't even true for most of the movies that people complain about, by the way. Most of this is in bad faith. But if Disney thought it was true, why aren't they afraid of sending bad messages to young boys? Why aren't they afraid of writing these male characters who treat the princesses with anything but love until the 11th hour, like a boy who pulls on your pigtails because, that means they like you? And what honestly breaks my heart is that these movies are advertised in the way that I mentioned before. Even Frozen, it's beyond just Snow White. Like, this is more progressive and modern and empowering. But in reality, we're going backwards. I don't want my kids to think that men are projects that you pour your time into fixing. That it is the job of Moana or Snow White or Elsa or Anna to save the day alone and wrangle these men who are irresponsible, selfish, emotionally immature, and lack empathy for anyone but themselves. Or that it's Anna's job to save the day, but Kristoff's job to just stay out of the way so the plot can wrap up because he is useless. As I said, Maui, Naveen, and Kristoff are all at different levels of this issue, but it's only getting worse. Disney listened to so much bad faith criticism about their old movies having damsels in distress that they have gone full circle. Not only do all these jabs at the princesses by the male characters feel mean-spirited, but Disney thinks they are avoiding a story where a princess just ends up as someone's wife. When in reality, they are instead creating stories where the princesses end up as someone's mother, where they have to mother their husbands who are Peter Pan-esque man-children. Some people are boycotting this movie because of Snow White, some people are boycotting it because of the evil queen. I think that this is all a distraction from our real enemy, which is Jonathan and his toxic masculinity problems. If you ask me, it is not princess problems, it is prince problems. But I'm mostly kidding, we cannot just pin the blame on the leading men here. The musicals as a whole are dysfunctional right now. And I have an entire video about the downfall of the Disney movie musical explaining why. There are lots of interviews and sources that even the most chronically online person has not seen. There was stuff that only had 100 views when I found it, so I hope that you guys enjoy it. It shines a light on why Disney's pipeline is killing their musicals. This has been Calxiyn caring way too much, and thank you for caring.